Awards season is a great time to look back at all of our favorite films, shows, and performances of the last year. But every time the Emmy Awards roll around and nominations are announced, there's so much confusion about the seemingly random categories that some shows and actors are slotted into. So what's really going on here?
They don't want honest. They want entertainment.
Let's take a closer look at the full Emmy process and the awards culture that drives it to figure out what's really behind category fraud, and if there's anything that can be done to fix it. It's no big secret that pretty much everyone in Hollywood wants not only the fame and fortune that can come with their jobs, but also the award recognition. Award season has long been rife with questionable choices and slightly shady attempts to boost one's profile. But it's not always just about puffing up egos. Winning a coveted award can help bring new life to an acting career, help a filmmaker secure their next job, or keep a show on the air for another season. So it's not really a surprise then that the people involved are willing to do pretty much whatever it takes to secure a win.
So it's for TV?
Some people and companies are so desperate to win those little statues that they'll go to some really wild lengths, like ESPN submitting fake names into Emmy categories, and then when they won, getting the fake name taken off of the trophies and the names of their real on-air personnel put on so that they could pretend that they won, a scheme that they kept up for over a decade. And this is part of a larger trend that seems particularly noticeable at the Emmy Awards: category fraud.
You're pirates!
So-called category fraud works slightly differently between the acting and show categories, but the basic function is the same. Unlike with other award shows, where which category someone or a production is slotted into is based on specific facts, say the length of time that someone is on screen, or quite specific genre categories, for example, Emmy submissions are much more vibes-based. The producers, actors, and others involved in the show can essentially submit for whatever category they choose, which means everyone tends to go for the one they think they'll be able to win, even if it doesn't necessarily match up with the actual role or show itself. For the acting awards, this can lead to actors who were clearly major parts of their shows, and sometimes literally main characters, to submit themselves as supporting. This, in theory, ups their chances for a win since they will, compared to the other actually supporting roles in the category, have had a lot more screen time to prove their award worthiness. Sometimes the actors make this choice themselves, but often it's part of a larger strategy on the part of the producers to attempt to game the system, to get as many nominations and wins for their show as possible.
You enjoy the game.
I do. Last thing I expected.
And you play it well.
I'd like to keep playing it.
Take Peter Dinklage, who was clearly a main character in Game of Thrones ensemble, getting submitted as supporting every year. Or when Shailene Woodley was submitted as supporting for the first season of Big Little Lies, even though her character was functionally a, or possibly even the, main character for that season.
You guys are just right. You're exactly right. And for some reason that makes me feel wrong, I guess.
This can also happen with supporting actors submitting for guest nominations, which are supposed to be for roles that have very little screen time, say an episode or two, but make a big impact. For example, Joe Morton, who played Olivia's father on Scandal, was submitted as a guest star even though he was in nearly every single episode of that season. There are also other weird quirks of the industry that can lead to actors having to do this kind of category fraud, even if it isn't something they necessarily want. Take Rose Byrne having to submit herself as supporting for Damages, even though she was clearly a co-lead, just because, allegedly, Glenn Close had put it in her contract that only she was allowed to be submitted as lead for awards. Or sometimes an ensemble cast will decide that, because they're all equally integral to the show, they'll all submit as supporting to keep there from being a split where everyone is doing equal work, but some get to be lead and others supporting, as we saw with Modern Family and the earlier seasons of Friends.
Family is family, whether it's the one you start out with, the one that you end up with, or the family that you gain along the way.
This is definitely a nice thought in theory, but it can, and often does, lead to those leads from hit shows dominating the supporting categories, and in turn pushing out so many actually supporting roles. Odd category choices that go in the other direction, where an actor is submitted for a category that would traditionally have more screen time, say a supporting role going for lead, is generally not seen as category fraud because they're essentially putting themselves at a disadvantage by going up against people who had much more screen time to convince the voting body that they deserve to be rewarded. But of course, the biggest confusion around category fraud every year usually has to do with the genres shows are placed under. Every year when awards season comes around now, there's a slew of people asking, wait, The Bear is a comedy? Sure, it has funny moments, but on the whole, it's a pretty dramatic, stressful show.
Carmen, I need you to check the Branzino.
I feel like that was a shot, Carm.
I'm saying this is why I didn't want to come home. This is why.
You.
What?
So, how did it end up in the comedy category? Just like with the acting awards, show producers are able to submit their shows for pretty much whatever categories they want. After complaints following the 2015 Emmys, the Academy actually switched up their rules a bit because of all of the ruffled feathers about the various category shenanigans, particularly in the Comedy Award, which saw Netflix moving Orange is the New Black and Showtime moving Shameless into the category. To try to combat this, they instituted a rule that capped comedy submissions at 30 minutes, so all hour-long shows had to go back to drama. Though producers do still have the option to ask for a review to allow their longer show to compete in the comedy category if they want. But TV has changed so much, even in just the past few years. With the takeover of streaming, shows aren't as beholden to the old-school runtimes and slot lengths, because traditionally it was pretty standard that comedies would fit half-hour slots, while dramas would get a full hour. Shows are so much more willing and able to bend and mix genres now, too. So many of the most beloved shows of recent years aren't straight comedies or dramas, they're both.
All we have to do is just stay calm and make sure
Sydney!
What was that?
I fell through a wall. Good morning.
Damn, you got strong.
And this is how we ended up with shows like The Bear and Barry, which can get really dark but are only around half an hour per episode, being submitted as comedies.
There's some days you don't think you deserve to live, and the only thing that'll make you forget is by being someone else.
While shows like Succession and The Curse, which have a pretty equal mix of drama and humor to those shows, but have hour-long episodes, were submitted as dramas. It's not really about the content of the shows themselves, just the runtimes and categories that the show's producers think they'll most easily be able to win.
Dad, why?
Why? Because it works. I win.
One big problem people do have with the dramedies taking over the comedy category is that they often keep actual comedies from getting nominations or wins in the category, since those dramedies are better awards bait. And so it can at times feel like we've kind of just got two drama categories. While the dramedies rack up awards, hit comedies like The Good Place, Parks and Rec, New Girl, Superstore, and more never won an Emmy.
This is the bad place.
Shows like The Bear certainly do deserve to be rewarded. It's really just a signal that the award show probably needs to make some larger changes to keep up with the times. While obviously those changes in 2015 didn't fix everything, they did at least start the ball rolling in the right direction. The number of nominees in both the comedy and drama categories were increased from 5 to 7 to attempt to give more shows a chance in both categories. Though, given how prominent it's become as a genre, it might just be time to give dramedies their own separate category. And while they did institute a limit on who is allowed to submit for guest star, now it's capped at having appeared in 50% of a season or less. They could still make some improvements in the main acting categories to help level the playing field and stop lead actors from taking spots from actual supporting roles. But at the end of the day, there's no way to fix every single category. There's always going to be some nomination that people don't agree with, or something that gets snubbed. But that doesn't mean it's not worth it to at least try to make some improvements where possible. Award shows have come to feel less and less relevant in a world where we're constantly connected to the entertainment industry on a regular basis. There's no need to wait all year to find out what was the best of the best, because we're all always discussing it, and sometimes fighting about it, online throughout the year. There's always something new premiering, and there just seems to be so much talent everywhere that often isn't getting rewarded.
Twice as good.
Twice as good as them to get half of what they have.
And so the category fraud problem on top of all of that certainly isn't helping the Emmy Awards. But that doesn't mean all is lost. The Emmys could work on updating their categories, inviting more people, and a more diverse group of people at that, into the voting body so that we don't end up with the same handful of nominees and winners year after year after year, and updating the format of the show itself to fix the awkward pacing. But that doesn't mean that they don't still have their place, if they're willing to adapt at least. It's great to see people who are are really good at their jobs finally getting their moment of recognition in such a big way. The Emmy Awards have never been and will never be perfect, but they could regain some of their prestige and wider public interest by updating themselves for our modern day, and making sure everyone that's putting in the work in Hollywood at least has a shot at getting recognized. Let us know, what kinds of changes would you like to see made to the Emmys going forward? And who are some people that you think would make for great hosts? That's The Take. Click here to watch the video we think you'll love, or here to check out a whole playlist of awesome content. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications.